There are moments in your life that don't just happen. They are orchestrated, not by chance, not by coincidence, but by the deliberate hand of the Almighty who saw your soul before your birth and whispered, "This one is mine." This moment, right now, this precise second you're living in, was not an accident. It is not random that you're hearing these words. It is not by mistake that your heart is beating a little faster, that your spirit is leaning in closer, that your curiosity feels like destiny trying to remind you of something you forgot. God says, this moment was written for you. Before the doubt, before the heartbreak, before the betrayal, before the confusion, this moment was planned as a sacred encounter between heaven and your life. There were delays, yes. There were storms that tried to knock you down, yes. There were nights when you didn't know if you'd survive, but God says, all of that was preparing you for this now. You are standing at the beginning of a spiritual turning point that has been waiting for your soul to catch up to its purpose. And just like that, a divine shift is being activated over your life. Heaven has been holding something back, something massive, something holy, something that will only make sense in hindsight, because God needed you to be still long enough to hear Him clearly. He needed you to get quiet, to get alone, to get desperate enough to start asking, God, what are you doing in my life? And now that you've reached the edge of your breaking point, you're finally at the beginning of your breakthrough. This moment wasn't written for your comfort. It was written for your calling. And your calling is rising like fire from the ashes of every time you were overlooked, every time you were silenced, every time they thought you had no value. They don't know what God was doing behind the scenes. They don't know that while they were rejecting you, God was rewriting the script of your life with favor, with restoration, with holy surprise. The reason you feel unsettled is because your spirit knows something is shifting even before your mind understands it. The old doors are closing not because you did something wrong, but because God is pulling you into alignment with a new season that doesn't need your past identity to function. He's stripping away the labels others put on you so He can reveal the glory He planted within you. He's tearing down the ideas you had about who you needed to be so He can show you who He created you to become. And yes, it's scary to let go of what's familiar. Yes, it's terrifying to surrender to a plan you don't fully understand. But God says, child, this is the moment I've been preparing you for. Don't run. Don't second guess. Don't delay. Just say yes. Because what's coming next doesn't depend on who supports you or who understands you. It only depends on your willingness to say, God, I trust you even now. The angels are watching. Heaven is waiting. And your name has been called in the spirit realm. God says, step forward. This moment has your name written all over it. This isn't the end. This isn't the pause. This is the beginning, the doorway, the holy unlocking of everything they said would never happen. Your prayers, the ones you whispered through tears and fatigue, have risen as incense before the throne of the Almighty. And God did not forget. He did not turn His face from you. He did not ignore the pain you buried so deep, even you stopped talking about it. Heaven saw you when you were silent. Heaven recorded every sacrifice you made in secret. Heaven kept track of every seed you sowed when no one applauded. And now, the harvest is beginning. Not because you're perfect, but because you didn't quit. Not because you earned it, but because you endured it. This is the moment God chose to reward your faithfulness. Don't look back. Don't go searching for old confirmations. Don't try to make sense of why others left or why certain doors were slammed shut. It was all leading you here. The betrayals were part of the blueprint. The delays were part of the strategy. The rejection was redirection. And now, as heaven opens this new scroll of destiny, your spirit is being called higher. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to chase anyone. You don't need to prove yourself. The anointing on your life is enough. The oil God has poured over your head in private is about to flow publicly. And when it does, the ones who dismissed you will have no choice but to acknowledge the divine mark on your life. This is that moment, the one written before time, the one your soul has been waiting for, the one heaven whispered about while you slept. God says, this moment was written for you, and it starts right now. This moment was never meant to arrive quietly. It was destined to thunder through the silence of your waiting, to rise like prophecy from the dust of forgotten dreams, to break every lie that convinced you were disqualified, too late, or too broken. God says, this is the moment where what didn't make sense finally begins to reveal its purpose. Every delay that made you question your worth, every closed door that made you wonder if you were seen, every season where you felt invisible, none of it was wasted. It was all sacred timing disguised as disappointment. You were not being punished. You were being positioned. You were not being denied. You were being protected. What the enemy tried to use to bury you, God has now transformed into the soil where your next miracle is about to bloom. Heaven has held this moment with the tender hands of divine patience, waiting for the exact alignment of time, character, and calling to release what has your name on it. You thought God forgot? You thought heaven was silent? No, God was preparing the table. God was filling your cup. God was clearing the room of every spirit, person, and influence that would have contaminated your promise. This is why the pain lasted longer than expected, because your preparation required precision. This is why the silence felt unbearable, because the voice of God was shaping you without words. You're not late, you're not behind, and you are not forgotten. You are right on time for a divine appointment that was hidden from your understanding to preserve your humility. Heaven never wanted you to idolize the outcome, only to trust the process. God didn't want you to worship the promise. He wanted you to become the person strong enough to carry it without letting it carry you away from Him. That's why He stripped away the counterfeit blessings. That's why He allowed the friendships to fall apart. That's why He exposed the lies, removed the people who secretly hated you, and severed ties with the ones who only clung to your light because they feared their own darkness. You kept thinking it was rejection, but heaven says it was refinement. God was refining your discernment, your faith, your obedience, your patience, because what's coming next is weighty. It's not just about elevation, it's about alignment. It's not just about blessings, it's about legacy. And legacy requires clarity. Legacy demands surrender. God says, this moment was written in the presence of angels who knew that if you made it to this point, still believing, still breathing, still praying, you'd be ready for what they've been assigned to help you carry. You don't realize the magnitude of what's coming. That's why God kept you hidden. That's why He allowed the humiliation. Because when the vindication comes, it will be undeniable that it was God who lifted you, not your own strength, not their approval, not worldly connections. You were set apart for this. The warfare that nearly destroyed you was the confirmation that you were carrying something the enemy feared. And even when you felt abandoned, God never looked away. His eye was on you. His spirit was surrounding you. Every sleepless night you survived was a chapter in your scroll. Every unanswered prayer was a seed waiting for divine rain. And now, heaven is thundering with movement on your behalf. The chains are breaking in places you haven't even stepped into yet. The doors are opening in rooms you didn't even know existed. People are speaking your name in meetings you weren't invited to, but heaven was. Contracts are aligning. Hearts are softening. Miracles are forming. And the wind of God is shifting in your direction. Do not go back. Do not respond to the voices of yesterday. Do not shrink yourself to fit the version of you that people could control. That version no longer exists. You have been upgraded in the spirit, and God is commanding you to walk like it. Not in arrogance, but in awareness. Not in pride, but in purpose. The enemy knows he lost you. That's why the pressure increased before this breakthrough. That's why the attacks got personal. That's why you started feeling the weight of depression, loneliness, spiritual fatigue, because the final push was the hardest. But look at you, still standing, still seeking, still believing. And God says, that's why I chose you. Not because you were the strongest, but because you kept showing up when you felt the weakest. Not because you had all the answers, but because you never stopped asking the right questions. And now, this moment you are living in is sacred ground. This breath you just took was approved by heaven. The weight you carried is about to be exchanged for glory. The sorrow you wore like armor is about to be lifted. The season you endured in silence is about to erupt with beauty. And when it happens, not even you will be able to deny that it was written. That this very moment, right now, where your eyes are reading these words and your heart is waking up to the sound of divine confirmation. This moment was written for you, not for them, not for the ones who mocked you, not for the ones who gave up, for you. And God says, I'm not done yet. I'm just beginning. The rest of your life is about to be the reward for the years you felt forgotten. This is not random. This is revelation unfolding. And heaven is not asking you to understand it, just to walk in it. Because this moment is not a maybe, it is a mandate. And you are the one it was written for. God says, I have waited generations to bring you to this intersection, to this divine crossroad where your past no longer owns you and your future begins to recognize your name. This moment, this breath, this awakening you feel stirring in the center of your chest is not emotional confusion. It is divine confirmation. You've spent years walking through storms that never made sense, valleys that tried to steal your voice, betrayals that fractured your trust so deeply it nearly silenced your spirit. But now heaven is showing you that none of that pain was in vain. Every tear you cried watered the soil of a promise that required waiting. You didn't miss your moment. You were maturing into it. And now, all of heaven is turning its gaze toward you. Not because you're perfect, but because you were faithful in the wilderness when it felt like no one saw you but God. You were faithful when the doors slammed shut in your face, when your prayers bounced back like unanswered echoes, when even your own heart questioned if you'd ever feel hope again, but you still kept going. You still held onto a sliver of belief, even when it trembled in your hands. And now God is saying that belief has become the blueprint for your breakthrough. You don't realize how sacred your survival is. The battles you faced would have buried someone else, but you kept showing up, scarred but not surrendered, broken but not bitter, exhausted but not empty. And that is why this moment carries the weight of heaven's signature. This isn't the reward for your perfection. This is the reward for your perseverance. This is why God isolated you, why he said no to things you begged him for, why he removed people you thought you couldn't live without, why he kept you in hidden seasons that felt like abandonment but were actually protection. He had to preserve you from premature exposure because what he wrote over your life requires a level of wisdom, strength, and surrender that cannot be rushed. You thought you were being delayed, but God was safeguarding your destiny from people who would have mishandled your greatness. That's why they left. That's why they ghosted you. That's why the love you gave so freely was never returned the way it should have been. Because heaven had to teach you not to place your identity in hands too fragile to hold you. And now, God says, your name is being whispered in rooms you never entered, because your obedience spoke louder than your presence ever could. You don't even know the full extent of the spiritual war that surrounded your name while you were just trying to survive the day. Demons were assigned to destroy your joy, to suffocate your purpose, to twist your thoughts until you questioned your existence. But God intercepted every assignment with his mercy. You were marked for this moment. Heaven had you on a watch list for miracles. You were not overlooked. You were overprotected. That relationship that fell apart wasn't the end of your story. It was the cleansing of your heart. That job you lost wasn't your failure. It was the redirection of your purpose. That opportunity that passed you by wasn't your rejection. It was divine rerouting. And every time the enemy tried to convince you that your silence was the evidence of God's absence, he was actually speaking through the stillness. teaching you how to hear his voice not through noise, but through knowing. You learned how to walk by faith without applause. You learned how to be obedient without validation. You learned how to praise even when your world was falling apart. And now heaven is pouring back into you everything you poured out when you had nothing left to give. God says, I saw you clinging to hope when all logic said let go. I saw you getting back up when shame whispered you weren't worthy. I saw you blessing others while your own heart was bleeding. And for every invisible act of faith, I have released an invisible army to clear your path forward. What happens next will be undeniable. Doors will open without human permission. Chains will fall off that you forgot you were even wearing. Prayers you whispered years ago, thinking they were forgotten, are now being activated by angels who were assigned to guard the harvest. Your name is shifting atmospheres. Your presence is intimidating spirits you haven't even encountered yet. And the level of favor coming toward you will confuse those who thought you were finished. God says, they've buried you in a season I was planting you. They mocked you in a season I was molding you. They forgot you in a season I was fortifying you. And now, when you rise, it will be with power they cannot explain and peace they cannot steal. You will not have to force it. You will not have to chase it. You will not have to beg for what is already yours by divine inheritance. What's coming next will feel like sudden breakthrough, but heaven wants you to know it was written. It was spoken into time before you were formed in your mother's womb. You are not entering a new chapter. You are stepping into a new covenant, one where the battle ends, one where the waiting breaks, one where the healing finally makes sense. And when you step into it, you will look back and thank God not just for what he gave you, but for what he didn't. For every no that saved your soul, for every delay that protected your destiny, for every heartbreak that redirected your heart toward heaven. Because this moment was always waiting for you. This is the shift. This is the divine reversal. And you're no longer just surviving. You're stepping into the version of yourself that was always written in heaven's book. God says, this moment is not simply a gift. It is a shift in the entire atmosphere of your life, and it cannot be reversed by human hands or delayed by earthly opinions. The silence you've walked through was not abandonment. It was preparation. The moments when it felt like heaven was distant were actually the moments I was the closest, breathing into you strength for battles you didn't even know were approaching. I have not been punishing you. I have been preserving you, fortifying you for a kind of favor that requires deep roots, not shallow applause. You have cried enough tears to water 1,000 gardens. And now I will cause those seeds of sorrow to bloom into promises so beautiful you'll scarcely believe they were born out of pain. You're not late. You're not forgotten. You're not behind. You are exactly where I've ordained you to be, and all of time is bending to usher you into what I wrote before you ever took your first breath. The pages of your destiny are not blank. They're sealed with my fingerprints and marked by victories you haven't yet walked into. You didn't come this far to break. You came this far to be reborn. The identity the world tried to strip from you is being restored by divine fire. What the enemy tried to rename you, failure, unworthy, cursed, rejected, I am rewriting with the names I've always called you. Chosen, beloved, anointed, redeemed. I saw the nights you laid in bed staring at the ceiling, begging me for a sign, asking if it was all in vain, wondering if your prayers had expired in the air. I saw the moment your spirit nearly broke because you gave everything and still ended up empty. But I tell you now, not one moment was wasted. Not one prayer was unheard. Not one battle was overlooked. I recorded every cry, bottled every tear, and assigned angels to your name long before you even realized how valuable your story would be. The pressure you've endured has nothing to do with punishment and everything to do with purpose. You've been targeted in the spirit because the anointing on your life threatens systems you can't even see. The enemy tried to wear you out through confusion and delay, because if he could not destroy you, he thought he could at least distract you. But I blocked it. I blocked every silent attack, every plan plotted against you in the dark, every jealous word spoken behind your back, every generational curse that tried to sneak through the cracks. I intercepted it with mercy. I stopped it with blood. And I now stand before you and declare, it's time. It's time for you to rise. It's time for the fog to clear. It's time for your mind to rest and your spirit to breathe again. Heaven is orchestrating alignments on your behalf that would have shattered your understanding if I had shown you too soon. That delay you hated so deeply was heaven buying you time to become unshakable. That waiting season that nearly crushed your heart was the divine womb where your next level was being formed. You were not being delayed, you were being defined. And now, doors that never opened for anyone in your family will swing wide at your approach. Battles that have tormented your bloodline for generations will break in your lifetime. Prayers that have hovered over your household like unanswered clouds will pour down suddenly in miracles that make no sense to the natural mind. You were not just meant to survive the darkness. You were called to interrupt it. You are the living proof that resurrection is possible even after repeated betrayal. You are the proof that someone can lose everything and still rise with more than they lost. And now, I'm doing what no human can claim credit for. I am lifting you in front of those who doubted your strength. I am favoring you in ways that bypass qualification. I am promoting you in rooms where your name has never even been mentioned, because when I breathe on your name, no door can stay closed. And I need you to understand, this is not random. This is not luck. This is not coincidence. This is the moment I authored before you even knew how to speak my name. And now I am whispering something new into your spirit. You're safe. You're chosen. You're entering the season I created with your healing in mind. You will feel yourself come back to life. You will wake up without dread. You will love again without fear. You will walk through doors without anxiety. You will meet people who don't want to use you, but to build with you. You will be met with the kind of peace that doesn't just comfort you, it transforms you. The next part of your story won't make sense to those who only saw the chapter of your struggle. They will wonder how you survived. They will ask how you're still standing. But they won't understand it was never you. It was always me. I upheld you when your knees buckled. I fed your faith when your hope ran dry. I kept your soul intact when it cracked from grief. And now, I will honor every tear, every yes when you wanted to quit, every moment you chose to believe when nothing changed. I will honor you publicly for what you suffered privately. So open your hands. This moment isn't just coming. It has begun. You will look back on today not as another ordinary moment, but as the spiritual line that divided everything you endured from everything you are about to receive. And you will know it wasn't a coincidence. It was written. It was promised. And child, it is here.